you. So our first speaker tonight, I'd like to introduce Adrian Berendt, who, as well as being the 2020 coordinator for Kent and the Southeast, Adrian's had lots of years campaigning for active travel. And I think, Adrian, you've also got a link to Steyning, haven't you? Because your brother used to go to school here and used to come and visit him. So over to you, Adrian. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and hence the first slide. Actually, I thought this was my older brother. I think it's my other brother, my second brother. Circa 1962, at Steyning Grammar School, as it then was. I actually don't know what the play was. I was far too young, of course. But I think it might. I'm rather hoping it was All's Well That Ends Well, but we'll see. 2020 for us, 500 local campaigns in the UK and abroad. And you might, if you want to remember one or two numbers, 21 million people now live in local authorities that are committed to 20 miles an hour. So it's about almost a third of the population. So don't let anybody tell you it's an exception. It's perfectly normal. What are we campaigning for? We're campaigning to make 20 miles an hour normal, to make it the default speed on residential streets and in towns and village centres. I thought tonight I'd just go very briefly through why 20 miles an hour, because I'm sure you know all this. Where we are with 2020 in West Sussex, just a couple of stats there. I've been involved with a project in Faversham, which is not unlike Steyning. And so there may be some lessons there, and then I thought we'd have a few minutes on what next. So why 20 miles an hour? Well, it's there's all sorts of benefits which we'll see in a minute, but one of the key things is that for every mile an hour slower you drive, there are about 6% fewer collisions. So even when average speeds have only dropped by 1 or 2 miles an hour, it's still significant, the benefit in terms of casualties. It's a bit like being hit at 30, you don't walk away from that. Very likely you might die. You'll certainly be seriously injured. It's like falling out of a third floor window. If you hit at 20, you will probably suffer an injury, but it won't be nearly as bad. You're 7 times more likely to die at 30 miles an hour than at 20. This, I'm sure you know. Loads of benefits. There are economic benefits to towns and villages. There's social benefits. We see more walking and cycling where there's 20 miles an hour. We see people being preferred over traffic and so on. And environmental, because there's benefits around pollution reductions and less noise, as we know from the wider tyres are making more and more noise on cars these days. Just so you know that this is a global movement, and the UN has endorsed 20 miles an hour as the maximum speed limit where people and motor vehicles mix. And the UN Global Road Safety Week in about 6 weeks' time is going to be focusing on speed, on 20 miles an hour. So they will see a lot in the press about it. So it's a great time to be starting and going for 20 miles an hour. Just so you know what the Department for Transport says, and don't let anybody tell you any different. The DFT guidance, this is from 2013, where should the speed limit of 20 miles an hour apply? In the streets which are primarily residential, and also in town and city streets where pedestrian and cycle movements are high. So it is not an exception, it should be the norm. And this complies with the international guidance. What type of 20 miles an hour do you typically see? In the olden days, you see lots of humps and bumps and lots of traffic calming. Great, very good, very effective, but extremely expensive. And lots of people don't like the humps and bumps. And today's cars also are quite good at getting over them without people noticing. So actually, signed-only limits are slightly less effective in terms of the reduction speeds, but actually, because they are so much cheaper, you can put them over a much bigger area. In Tunbridge Wells, it cost us £40,000 to do 50 streets, of which 20,000 was on one street where we needed traffic calming. So you get a much bigger bang for your buck if you just do signed only, because you can do wide areas. And I highlighted Edinburgh there because we've just seen a new report come out, and casualties there were after they introduced 20 miles an hour throughout the city, not on all roads, but on the vast majority of roads. They've seen a third reduction in crashes. Enforcement, 20 miles an hour is enforceable. Some police choose to enforce it, some don't. Avon and North Somerset are big on this, and they issue lots of penalty notices for people in 20 miles an hour. And most important is the last sentence here. From April 2022, in-car limiters will enforce speed limits. So all new models from April 22 will have to have intelligent speed assistance, and that's coming very soon. And in Wales, it's normal. They're 30 miles an hour. They're just working out at the moment where they can allow 30 miles an hour. Where is it safe to go 30? So that's a big change that's coming in Wales. Where are we in West Sussex? Well, it's not great actually. We haven't got many campaigns. Steyning and Upper Beeding, fantastic. We know that a lot of Chichester is 20 miles an hour. There are one or two campaigns around in Midhurst where I went to school, and in Rogate where my brother now lives, but not enough. And so we really need more campaigns in West Sussex. And the issue in West Sussex around casualties is that casualty trends are going in the wrong direction. There was some progress up until 2010, like as we saw in many places in the country, but it's now gone into serious reverse. And you can see that casualties are now higher than they were in 2000. It is true to say that because of the new crash reporting system, that is part of the reason why the trend is upwards, but it's not the whole story. The trend was going upwards before that. This is part of a slide, the deck we showed to West Sussex County Council around Action Vision Zero. And what we showed was that actually the problem, which used to be on rural fast roads, is now increasingly on urban and minor roads. So getting 20 miles an hour in our towns and villages is really, really important for cutting casualties. And if you notice, that West Sussex, I asked West Sussex County Council for their speed limit policy. They said, well, they don't really have one. And then they dug something out from 2010. That is 3 years before the guidance came out from the DFT, and you'll see that it says recent guidance from the DFT in 2006, but it's been completely overruled now by stuff which came out in 2013. So that's something which we need to work on with West Sussex about changing the policy. It's not all bad news in West Sussex. They did adopt about 5 years ago a Vision Zero target, but as you can see, it's not going that well. And so they are reviewing that and seeing what they can do. So there may be some good news coming out of that. I don't know that yet. Quickly, lessons for Faversham. I've been working on a project there which has got 20 miles an hour throughout the town, the whole town, with the exception of a couple of roads on the outside. This project started with some local residents asking people where they felt unsafe on their roads. And they asked them to put the red dots on, and you can see where all the red dots, primarily on the busier roads, but actually in lots and lots of places where they felt unsafe. And as a result of that, they came up with a scheme that was designed by Phil James Associates for a 20 miles an hour scheme for basically the whole of the town. Mostly signed, a bit of white line removal in places to try and centre white line to move to slow traffic down a bit. Some change of parking, some gateways on the entrance to the scheme, and then around us as reminders as you go through the scheme. So that's what they call. You'll just notice at the bottom here we've got London Road, which is a main through road, the A2, Watling Street. Is not yet in the scheme, but maybe in the future. Now, some of the roads highlighted here in green and in purple, you'll see they came above the previous policy of Kent, which was anything above 24 miles an hour, you needed to have significant traffic engineering. And this was not going to be affordable. So what Kent agreed to do was they agreed to change their policy. And they changed the policy just almost 2 years ago now. And instead of saying you haven't got enough casualties to justify 20 miles an hour, which was the old policy, they're now saying actually if the community supports it, they will implement it. And the main thing they've changed is that they've said that between 24 miles an hour and 28 miles an hour, you can get away with psychological traffic calming, making your streets look nicer, which actually does help to reduce speeds. And then, but having agreed the scheme, it was a question of how we're going to fund it now. And luckily, for some, COVID came along, and with it, the emergency travel, emergency active travel funding. And Kent got a slice of this and said, great, we've got a scheme ready in Faversham to go. Let's put it into Faversham. So they've implemented it in Faversham. They've done it without many of the gateways and some of the centre line removal in the first instance. So they put the signs in place first, see what happens, see how successful it is, and then they'll add the other measures in later on. And that's just confirming that the 20 miles an hour was allowed as part of the response to COVID-19. Just so you know, 20 miles an hour, it's consistently popular. I don't know what it is in Steyning, but I bet it's similar figures. You know, you normally find 3 out of 4 people who you ask support 20 miles an hour. So as a result of all that, Faversham hit on the idea of healthier, safer and cleaner streets. So it's a joint KCC Faversham Town Council initiative. And what we've also done there is, in addition to the standard legal consultation which the county has to go through, we've also implemented a bit of software called Commonplace, which basically uses a map where you can register what you think about the town and what you'd like to change and how you'd like to change it. And it's all done with, you can put a pin on the map where you think there's a problem, or where you've got a suggestion. And you can see that there's comments spread right across the town. And as a result of that, we now know exactly what else we need to do to help make people feel safe walking and cycling through Faversham. They've implemented cameras just to see what the speed changes are, and I can tell you they're significant. Even with signs and lines, the speeds have come down, particularly on the faster roads, by quite a lot. Don't let anybody tell you that signs and lines don't work, because they absolutely do. And as sort of partly as a result of this, Kent has now signed up to Vision Zero itself, so there will be more 20 miles an hour. They're going to put more average speed cameras in place, and they're going to involve the community in the design of these things. What next? Well, we've already got we've set up a 2020 for Steyning, I'm delighted to see, and you should have received today, I hope, a draft template of a letter which you can send out to your local councillors if you've got. I think you've got elections coming up this May, I hope. So this you can use to try and get your candidates to commit to 20 miles an hour. Maybe they want to take a picture of themselves with take a selfie with the pledge. What else? Global Road Safety Week coming up on the 17th to 23rd of May, as I said. Lots of activity around that. That's something we can link on. You'll see it says 30 kilometres an hour as well, because it's a global thing, and we need to get the policy change in West Sussex. That's it. Great. That was very fast. It was very fast. I'm sure. I'm very happy to. I'll share the slides afterwards. But questions? Okay.
We had one question in the chat from David Clues, which was, I guess, a clarifying question around the casualty rates that were quoted about whether those were pedestrian casualties or.
No, they're all casualties. Casualties. All casualties.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian.
Roger? Roger? I think Roger's typing in a question. Does anyone else?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Just one question, Dawn. Adrian, you say it's enforceable.
Yep.
That's a different message that I got tonight from a meeting I was at with Sussex and Surrey Police about a fortnight ago, who said basically it wasn't. They wouldn't enforce it, and it was considered to be self-policing.
It is definitely, absolutely, and utterly enforceable. It is a choice of the police whether they choose to enforce it or not. And maybe a question to your Police and Crime Commissioner might be: will they support enforcement?
Yeah.
So it's a, you know, what the legislation does talk about self-enforcement, and I know the police are not keen to devote loads of resources to it, but they can do. There's no reason that they can't do some limited enforcement, particularly at the beginning, and they can also use social media a lot to say how much they are enforcing as well, which is quite effective.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of police forces are doing it. West Midlands, Avon and Somerset, the Met. I mean, lots of people doing it. It's a choice. It's a choice.
Okay. I mean, that would be very good if it did change, because they're very keen at the moment on speed watch groups. I think because of that reason, that they see speed watch as a means of trying to enforce 20 miles an hour, which means that you've got to have a lot of local volunteers willing to carry out speed watch.
It's not a bad thing, though. I think community speed watch is a pretty good thing. It means that the community is supporting something, and it gives a clear message. It's not about catching people. Community speed watch is about education. And I find when I'm out on speed watch, loads of people come up to me and say, "Great, fantastic, you're doing this. This is really good." But let's not overplay this enforcement thing. Even without enforcement, you will see, just with putting signs and lines in, you will see significant reductions in average travel speeds.
Yeah.
Of course, we'd love it. If people were going down at 20 through our towns and villages, but and I can tell you in Tunbridge, where they put it in, put 20 miles an hour in on some of on the main roads, where they were previously recording 30, 32 miles an hour, they're down to sort of 25, 26. That's a significant difference, and that's just simply by putting the signs up.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
I've got one. Yes. First of all, I live in Feltham in West Sussex. That's on the outskirts of Bognor Regis.
Yep, I know it.
It's not on your map. The entire village is 20 miles an hour, apart from the B2259, which is the old A259, which runs through the village.
I will get it updated tonight.
I went through some hoops about 2 years ago to attempt to find out how one could enforce the 20 mile an hour speed limit that exists. We live on a road which is part of the 20 mile an hour zone and has no footpaths at all. I couldn't get any positive support from my parish council, from the county council, who are the highways authority in the area, or from Sussex Police. And in fact, it got to the stage where with Sussex Police, I had to submit a Freedom of Information request to find out whether they had in fact ever tried to enforce a speed limit on this road, and whether or not they had ever issued any sort of penalty for people speeding on our road. The answer was no, and the person I spoke to at Sussex Police, having received the FOI response, told me that it was highly unlikely that they would ever try and enforce any kind of speed limit in a 20 mile an hour area, that in our particular case, the 20 mile an hour area had been selected by the parish council, and that if anybody wanted to enforce the 20 mile an hour limit, then it would have to be done via the machinations of the parish council. Problem there. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm telling you what they told me.
No, I agree.
They were supported by the county council, who told me roughly the same thing. And the county council, with a very sympathetic tone of voice, told us that the Sussex Police have got something like 6 or 7 people for the entire county for the enforcement of speed limits, and that they were much more likely to spend their time on the A27 or on the A23 than they were in some backwater of Bognor Regis. I also received very little support from the parish council. Most of the people who drive at high speed down the road, they are local people, and frequently will stop and give us a mouthful of bad language whenever we attempt to do anything about it. And so my main interest actually in appearing tonight was not to hear people tell me that 20 miles an hour is a good thing. I know that already. I'm a highway engineer by profession. But to know whether or not anybody has successfully enforced it without support from the police. Thank you.
Well, it's the police's job to enforce the law.
I know that.
Unless,
but bear in mind that they don't have enough people to stop rioting, to catch burglars, to catch sex pests, and so on and so on and so on. We are going to be very low priority. Let's face reality. We're going to be very low priority in terms of all the things that police have to deal with stressed budgets and so on that they have, which is why I think it's important for us as I don't mean people out there because I don't know any of you, but for us as a group of residents in this area to try and figure out some way of doing it ourselves. Some people have taken the law into their own hands in terms of they have strategically parked cars like a chicane all the way down the particular streets that they're bothered about. But that has caused comments from people driving and has caused comments from the police saying that they are in effect obstructing the highway. And so I wonder just how far one can go if the police are not interested. I mean, that's the main reason I came on tonight.
I'm just conscious of time moving on. We've not got a great deal of time this evening. I'm sure there's going to be lots of practical issues to get through. Luckily, our parish council is famously effective and receptive to this kind of request. A quick clarifying question from Vicky and Robin for Adrian. If you could clarify what a gateway is, please.
So it's an entrance to either to a village or to a town. You typically see them. They're called gateways. Typically on villages, you see big white gates as you go in, and they could be. You have planters in there. You have signs showing you're coming into a zone. So it's just to try and delineate. But in Faversham, we've got red strips across the road showing the 30 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour speed change.
I think we've got time for another question. Simon?
Yeah, thank you. On one of our local spotted sites, one of the arguments against the 20 mile an hour speed limit was the effect of the signage in a conservation area. I did have a look at the Highways England's way of sort of approaching that, but what would the approach be and how does that affect the conservation area? Personally, I don't have a problem with signage in a conservation area, but certainly that would be an argument that some people have a problem with it. I don't know how's that countered or what's the solution to that?
I suppose my first slightly cynical remark would be people never seem to mind about cars being parked in conservation areas, which I think look far uglier than a rather small sign. The second thing what Faversham has done, and Faversham's got a conservation area there, they've actually used a sort of buff colour 20 mile an hour sign on the roundel on the road, which looks okay. So you don't have to have the upright signage. You can actually have as few signs as you want. There's some recommendations about what you should have. If you have a limit scheme, then you need them. You should all sort of have them every couple of 100 meters if you're going to enforce. But if you're not going to enforce, then you actually need very few signs. So it's up to you as to how many you have, really. Okay.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to move us on. There will be an opportunity after Geoff's spoken to come up with some more questions that possibly you might be able to help us with as well, Adrian. But I'm aware time is creeping on. So thank you very much, Adrian. That was great. Can I bring in Geoff now to give us the lowdown on what's happening here? What's been happening here?
Yes, indeed. Let me just put this up on screen. Is that I hope that's showing okay. So what I thought I'd do is tell you a bit of the background of the Steyning idea, kind of where it came from, the thinking behind it, and give you a flavour of what it might look like. And actually, it would have been really helpful to have seen Adrian's presentation before I did this, because I could have taken a lot of the good ideas from it. But this is where we got to. But I'll talk also a bit about the process of going forward from here, some of the challenges, and then open it up for questions. But let me start by talking about where the idea came from. And it actually came from the parish council. But they quite cleverly, I think, decided that rather than going alone on this, it needed to be a community initiative. So they set up a community working party, to which they invited Greening Steyning. This was last November, I think, and it was rather a remarkable fluke, because the invitation came about a week after our transport group decided that we thought that a 20-mile-an-hour zone would be actually a really good initial initiative for us. So we were all ears. But they also invited the business chamber and invited Dean Haysom from there to actually be the chair of the group, and the community partnership. So 3 quite well-known local groups. But they also got Horsham District Council involved and West Sussex. So we were lucky to have Bob Platt and Tim Lloyd from Horsham. David Barling, our local representative at West Sussex, has been involved from the beginning. And he brought in, right from the beginning, Steve Douglas, who's from the Highways Department and is one of the senior highways planners. So we've had a really, really good team right from the beginning. And then soon after this, when we realized that we needed to work together with Bramber, Di Goodall and Mike Kroger from the Parish Council there joined in. So we've had quite a holistic group. And I have to say, it's gone from my perspective, it's gone very well. It's been a very productive discussion, which has been a pleasure to be part of. So let's just talk about the thinking behind this. Now, safety is obviously a really important concern in amongst here. And this is a map I discovered just recently of the crashes and incidents in our area in the last 10 years. It's a site called Crash Map. You can put in your postcode. And a couple of things, this was a surprise to me, because I certainly think of Steyning as a pretty safe place. I've not actually seen hardly any incidents, but as you see, there's been plenty. Fortunately, most of them have been minor ones, which are the yellow flags, but there have been quite a significant number of serious ones. And if you see down on the bottom right, there's a black one, which is a fatal accident on the Henfield Road just past Upper Beeding. But from the point of view of the Steyning zone, the bypass you'll see has been a bit of a hotspot, but there's been over 30 incidents in the last 10 years which got reported in the area of kind of built up Steyning. So this was a wake-up call for me, actually. I hadn't realized these incidents were so prevalent. But apart from safety, the group realized early on that there's significant other benefits too. We came to a consensus, really, that a 20-mile-an-hour zone would make the town just a much calmer place to be. And it would shift the balance in favor of walking and cycling, and away from the car being the dominant kind of activity in the whole town. And it would also cut road noise and vehicle emissions. But it's important to say we're thinking of this as a first step, not a final destination. And we'll come on to that a bit later. But we think it could be a very significant kind of psychological first step. So what would it look like? Now, we started out by thinking maybe it should just cover the high street or a few key roads. But when we looked at it, we quickly came to the conclusion it'd be much simpler and clearer if it covered the whole built up area. And that included, because one of the main entrances, Clays Hill, is actually in Bramber parish. You see that blue line is the parish boundary that snakes across. It would make a lot more sense to actually cover all of the entrances into the town. And so we'd be talking about putting sort of signs up at each of the 7 main entrances, the gateways, as I guess I've learned is the term for these. So that way we could cover the entire built up area. And there would be no confusion of am I in the zone or am I not in the zone. So these would be signals that you're entering a zone, but within the area, there would be reminder signs at key locations. But I think we realized that actually you'd have to be careful about these. You wouldn't want to plaster them everywhere. So that the emphasis would be on the places where people are most likely to speed up. And I don't think those are in the conservation areas. They are in the places where there's a bit of open road, like on coming down past the Catholic Church, or on Goring Road, or on Newham Lane, or indeed on Shooting Field, right by the school, where I know there's been some recent incidents which have been a real cause for concern. So you wouldn't need to plaster these everywhere. But we are thinking that because the two main roads into Steyning, the Horsham Road and the Clays Hill, are actually quite fast, there may need to be some physical traffic calming measures on those. And this is a good example of what Bramber has done. This is a little pinch point they have just by the bridge. But how it's going to work is that West Sussex will be responsible for the detailed design. So the specifics of the thing will come a bit later. This is the process going forward, just to put you in the picture. This doesn't happen overnight, but now is the kind of crucial consultation phase to test the idea in principle. Assuming that's comes to a positive conclusion, we then apply for a community highway scheme, which is the channel we're going to go through. And then over the summer, West Sussex will put in some of those road loops, which you've probably seen, for measuring road speeds. And that's crucial data for them to see what the current patterns are. They then design the scheme in consultation with us, and that's where we'll discuss, do we need traffic calming, where would the signs go, how much would it cost? And then October is the deadline for submitting the whole package to West Sussex to get signed off. And all going well, work would begin in 2022. So by the end of next year, hopefully it would be in place. So not overnight, but fairly speedy. Now, I've picked on a couple of challenges. The most obvious one is who's going to pay for this? Now, West Sussex does have a budget for this, but as you can imagine, their budgets are really under pressure at the moment. And so there won't be many schemes sailing through in the next year or two. But the good news is that both Steyning and Bramber the parish councils have got some earmarked funding from this section 106 money. That's money you get from developments where they have to pay some contribution towards community infrastructure. So they've actually got enough money, I think, to pay for the majority of it, already earmarked, sitting ready for a transport scheme to actually apply it to. So that should take the sting out of this. And we're not talking huge amounts of money. I think if we're talking mainly signs, we're talking, a few tens of thousands at the most. And if we get into road actually calming measures, it'll be a bit more, but it's not horrendous. Now, this question of, hang on, I'm just going to, yeah. The highway regulations is one of the areas which we are most uncertain about, to be honest. And I can see this is a real kind of can of worms, or it can be. There is this rather bizarre rule which has been referred to by Adrian, that if current average speeds turn out to be too high, you can't actually, or the police and the highways department may not support a scheme to reduce them. So if you're going too fast, it's too fast to have having a traffic reduction scheme. But I think this is subject to actually a subject to kind of discussion. And I gather that West Sussex, the actual West Sussex policy is in flux. So I think provided we have enough public backing for this, we will be able to make a case. But all these details will come at the design stage. And actually that's where advice from people who've done it before will be really handy. And then the final thing is enforcement, which we talked a bit about earlier. We've been assuming that police won't have resources to do this. So we're figuring it's down to us and encouraging behaviour change. And that's why we think the 20s Plenty campaign could be really important in just starting to make people aware of this. And we think attitudes will change over time, or we're very hopeful of that. Although it has to be said on the Facebook chat, there is a lot of people who doubt this. So what's happening right now is the public consultation to test the idea in principle, and every home in the affected area should have got a paper leaflet through the door by now. We've had a good number of those dropped in already at the post office or the Steyning Centre. That's basically a kind of, do you agree with it? Yes, no. But in parallel, we're doing this online survey, which I expect many of you have already filled in, where we provide space for comments and also ask a bunch of additional questions. And if you haven't done it yet, I'd really urge you to fill this in, because we can get so much more nuanced view from you. And those additional questions are looking to the future. Beyond the 20-mile-an-hour zone, what else could we do? And there's some questions about, should we think about reducing the speed limit on the bypass, which actually is a very big deal in highways terms, but I think local people are feeling very strongly about this as being a real danger spot. There could be options for further traffic calming and some temporary closures of the high street, or maybe even turning it into a shared space, like the area outside the Theatre Royal in Brighton, which is now a really nice area, but cars still go down it. But we're also looking at how do we encourage walking and cycling, how much appetite is there for improved public transport, and also for EV charging stations. So this is all about getting a feel for what people's priorities are, get their ideas, and to provide us with some ammunition to sort of start thinking about next steps going forward from here, which I think Dawn will be kind of coming back to. We've had a great response already. We've had nearly 700 so far, and I think your number, Adrian, of about 3/4 being in favour of it is pretty well spot on. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio at the moment. But if you've not yet had your say, make sure you do before the deadline. But the responses are giving us a real goldmine, I think. And it has to be said that there is plenty of comments of people who are sceptical. Some think we're completely crazy to be thinking about this. It's a waste of money, it's unenforceable. But they are outnumbered by those who think it's actually a very positive idea, and they've chipped in particular ideas about how certain roads need special treatment. But let me leave it there, and I'm hoping that Adrian might be able to help with some of the questions, as indeed some of the other working party members who are on the call, which would be great.
Okay, any questions for Geoff? Or any questions following on from Adrian that you didn't have answered either? See any? Oh yes, David, please.
Yes, I did put a comment up, and it was about the shared high streets, which personally I'm all for, but then that does have a consequence of people finding it difficult to park. And I was wondering, have these schemes thought of that, and how we are going to manage parking as a result?
I think the answer, David, is not yet. The parking issue, any change in the high street is actually a really sensitive one around parking. But what we wanted to do was get an appetite for whether people thought this was actually a good idea to start thinking about. But the answer is not yet. But maybe that's something that Adrian will have some experience of shared space schemes, because it's.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably at some point it's worth asking, doing some surveying work amongst particularly shopkeepers, and ask them how many people they think arrive in cars. And if you correlate that with how people actually arrive, you ask the customers as well, you might find some surprising results. That's typically what seems to happen, is that more people arrive on foot and by bike than you actually think. Certainly in Walthamstow, which is worth looking at. I mean, if you get a chance, when we're allowed to go up there and have a look and see what they've done, That's probably the gold standard for what's called low traffic neighbourhoods up there, where they had Orford Road, which was beset by it was a through route, absolutely really quite ghastly, lots of empty shops and all that sort of thing. They removed the vehicles from there amid much protest, lots of concern about where are people going to park and where people are going to drive and so on. And now Orford Road is flourishing. I mean, not in the last few months, obviously, but with it being pedestrianised, it looks wonderful. And it's what's quite interesting when you do the package of measures in terms of trying to reduce the speeds and trying to reduce the volume of traffic, you do actually see much less pressure on parking, because a lot of the parking is because people are driving around. They need a parking space where they come from and a parking space where they're going to. Well, if you can increase the amount of active travel, then obviously the car doesn't move. It stays in one place. So there's quite a lot of evidence around where you introduce these sorts of active travel measures that you actually reduce the parking problem.
Just to come back on that, I think one of the things that just in informal conversations that struck me as being a part solution to this is if people who live in Steyning kind of got into the habit of actually, rather than driving through the village to get out the other end. So, if you lived in Penlands, rather than driving down the high street to get to Washington, you instead went the other way, and vice versa. A lot of through traffic could actually just could go like that rather than like that, and that alone would actually have a big difference in cutting down the amount of cars in the crunch spots.
Mm. Okay, anyone else who hasn't asked a question yet? I'm just seeing.
There is a question which I don't know the answer to about Upper Beeding, but I can hazard a guess that I doubt whether there will be a significant change, because there's so few recorded casualties. You need quite big data sets to see whether there is a significant change. I don't have the actual answer, but that's you normally need big lots of data.
I wonder if Roger Potter, who chair of the parish council in Bramber, has got any information on how the Bramber 20-mile-an-hour scheme has actually impacted things.
Yeah, it's been in place now for probably 8-9 years, 10 years probably, and we've just started doing speed watch because of people's comments regarding the speed at which traffic comes through the street, which is the 20-mile-an-hour area, and when you look at the average speeds, because we've got a vehicle activation device in the street where we can see the average speeds. The average speeds aren't particularly high, sort of, and Mike will be able to confirm this, but roughly sort of 24, 25 miles an hour, that sort of speed. But of course, in that mix, a lot of people are going a lot faster than that. And that is what people notice. They don't notice. they don't talk about average speeds. They talk about the people that they've seen come belting through, which is one of the reasons that we've started Speed Watch. So it's a mixed experience, Geoff. And I think you probably find the same in Steyning, because if people are used to going 30, 35 miles an hour down the street, down a particular street, and it looks to them as if it's safe, then they probably are inclined to continue doing it, which is why I raised the flag about volunteers and Operation Speedwatch. And it's not, I agree, it's not trying to find people or anything like that. It's about changing behavior. And we haven't had enough time with it yet to see if that behaviour changes. But it's the exceptions that are the problem in the area. The people that do continue to speed. So that's a summary of our sort of experience in Bramber. And the only other point I was going to make, Geoff, to you regarding the high street in Steyning is that I think because of the age profile of the area, more and more people, higher and higher percentage of the people that live in the area are going to want to be able to drive into Steyning to shop. So we do have to strike a reasonable balance between what you're suggesting and people's ability to get to the shops.
Well, I think the shared space idea would allow people who need to park right near the shops to drive in carefully and park in disabled spots, perhaps in the car park.
Yeah.
But the vision there is, rather than having really tiny, narrow pavements outside all the shops, there would be much broader pavements.
Yeah.
You would discourage parking outside the bakers, which is, and it means that you can get down the street without having to dive in and out to pass somebody. And at the moment, it's, I'm sure you've seen it. You go down on a busy day, and if somebody in a mobility vehicle is trying to get through, it's like a major traffic incident.
Yeah,
because there's nowhere for them to go.
Yeah, sure.
So feeling is that with some imagination there could be a solution here, but that's the next. That could be one of the next challenges rather than the one at hand at the moment.
The other thing about the Bramber experience was that we started off with speed humps as the sole measure. But then, because of the impact of traffic going over it on the surrounding houses in the conservation area, a lot of them were taken out because they were damaging some of the housing, which is one of the rationales in introducing the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yeah, I think we've taken that message on board, actually. But
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to move us on now because I'm aware that time is running fast and we've got other speakers. There will again be more time for any more questions. I'm going to say something now, if that's okay, but thank you very much, Geoff. That's great. I just wanted to say something that really sort of expands really on what Geoff has just said, and also encourage people to join us. And Geoff, have you got that image up for me? Just going to share something. Okay. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So following on from what Geoff has just said, really, it is very much a first step, the 20 is plenty. And interesting hearing what people are saying. It is all about cultural change in people's attitudes to how we use our roads and who has the greatest share of them. And in particular, it's about changing the dominance of the car, I guess. So I'd like to show you last year I think most of you probably know, but for the 2030 project, we did a survey last year asking people to visualize how they would like 2030 to be in Steyning and Bramber. And could you click on the next slide, Geoff, please? Thank you. And these are the underlying things we took from this, if you like, our vision of how we would like transport to be in Steyning and Bramber in 2030. I'm not going to read them all out because you can see them there. And I guess it's all a lot of the things we've spoken about this evening. It's about making our streets a safe place for everyone, a happy place for everyone, and a healthy places to be. So these were the key points of our vision. This is what we're aiming for. 20 is plenty is just the start. If you are enthused by what you see there, it would be great to have some more people get on board and get involved in our campaign. We have not had chance to get much going yet because of the COVID restrictions, so I'm sure you all understand, but the 20s Plenty campaign is going to start kicking off now. Thanks to Sue Glover, who's with us tonight, we have got one project bubbling away nicely, the Reminiscence Project, she's called it. So Sue had the idea of approaching some local care homes to ask them about their memories of what it was like on the roads when they were young people. And I think we can all remember what it was like in the first lockdown during COVID, and we all had that experience of the calmness, the peace. Obviously, I know realistically we're not going to jump straight back to that, but wouldn't it be lovely if we could have our streets calmer and quieter, and more people were walking around and traveling by bike, and using also the high street as a sociable place where, you know, you could sit and chat. So the whole idea of having, you know, places that are more sociable in the centre of Steyning is something is really important to us. Anyhow, Stu's project hopefully is going to get off the ground with the museum. We are hoping to have an exhibition showing people's photos of that time, sharing their stories of what it was like on the roads. I guess we're talking 1950s, 1960s. And already Valerie Manor in Beeding has produced lots of writing, apparently by their residents and their families, as well as pictures. We have said this is a project for the 70+ age group, so it would be great if you know anyone who would like to contribute to it. I think it's really important to remember, look back and remember how it was, as well as helping us have a vision for the future of how it could be. So what we're going to be doing from now on is the market on Saturdays, the farmers market. This coming weekend, we've got stickers to give out for wheelie bins, cars and windows. If you're up for supporting us, that would be great. We can't actually be there in person to give them out, but they will be on a table in the market as you come in. Every month thereafter, starting from May, we will be able to have a stall back there then, and then we will be talking to people, trying to get people to support us and come along and join in with various activities. And the last thing I want to say is it would be great to have some new people to come along and join our transport group. If you share our vision, it would be really lovely to have your ideas and your enthusiasm and try and make this a much bigger thing. We have had quite a bit of contact from other people in the community, particularly there's some concerns at the moment around the school. I know there's petitions being started around the school because there's been some near misses with children being almost hit by cars. It would be great to join forces maybe with them as well and get support. Talking about campaigns, I'm going to pass over now to Alan, who's going to introduce Adam to us, who can probably tell us a lot more about campaigning.
Thanks, Dawn. Yes, I'm going to quickly introduce Adam, who I first met in his role as a professional photographer, taking my photo. Try and make me look good for the company website, so hopefully I can make him look good in return. Adam is a leading light in the Shoreham-by-Sea scheme, which, as I understand it, encourages people to take up cycling for leisure, utility, getting about, the school run, health and exercise. And lately the group has been actually in the news as one of the kind of key stakeholders in the goings on with pop-up COVID cycle lanes down in Shoreham. Adam has kindly agreed to join us this evening to tell us more about the group's work and yes, maybe some lessons learned about the best way to campaign for change. So I will hand over to Adam.
Thank you very much for that, Alan. Nice to see you on here. I think last time I saw you, I cycled past very briefly. Realised it was you after I'd gone past, but thank you for that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history. I'll try and keep it short and sweet as I can, what we do and what we've been up to and our learning curve and the lessons that we've learned. So Shoreham-by-Cycle is a community group. We were set up to improve and be a voice for cycling in Shoreham and Ada. And I really want to stress that it's cycling, not cyclists, that we try and represent here. We've learned and we've refined what we're about. And our 3 priorities are, and in this order, to liaise with the authorities, to improve conditions for cycling, to help people understand what better streets could look and feel like, and to encourage people to use bikes for everyday transport. Oh, I've just realised that that isn't working. Okay, I'm gonna have to go that way. So starting out, we were started by a group of friends. There were just a handful of us, 3 of us, who were discussing things in a pub over a pint or 2. And we decided that actually if we set up a group to improve cycling and encourage more people to cycling and be a voice for cycling in Shoreham and Ada, that would be quite a useful thing to do. So we quickly set up a Facebook page and a Twitter account and started getting the message out there. And we used a press release to send to the local paper. And one of the things I want to stress here is that we're very keen, as I said, not to represent cyclists, but to represent cycling. And that's the message we want to get across. So if ever we feature in the news or in articles or on TV or anything, we'll always be in normal, ordinary clothes, and to make cycling as ordinary a transport choice as possible and to show it in an ordinary way. It's not cyclists, it's just people getting about by bike. So the first thing that we did when we first started setting out, we weren't really sure what we needed to do or how we were going to get the message out there or the best way of doing that. And we just started informing people of what was happening in Shoreham. This is the old toll bridge in Shoreham, and we were saying that this is closed and this is why it's closed. There was a big hole there, and we spoke to workmen, and we were just informing people and saying the workmen said that they're going to finish work in 2 days' time. And then this was the new Downs link, and that this is open. And then we thought, well, what can we do that's a bit more than this? And we came up with a little campaign to report all the potholes that people mentioned. We asked people online and said, can you mention any potholes? And that seemed to be quite a good way of winning people over, whether you drove or whether you were on bikes. So we just spent a day going around with the Love West Sussex app, reporting them on a Friday. And we noticed that by Tuesday, they'd had a little white mark around them and that they were being fixed. So that was quite nice to get some sort of action there. And then we found we went to talks. This is a Shoreham Society talk, and we were going to Shoreham Port Authority talks and Residents Association talks, and we were just asking questions as Shoreham-by-Cycle and just getting the name out there, being seen by people. And it was a very quick learning curve that we realised actually we need to expand from 3 people just to a little bit more. So we put some feelers out there. We needed a bit more information and a bit more skill set. So we're very lucky that we've got somebody who is very good with words and communication. I'm okay with photography and the visuals. We've got a lawyer who is good at looking at details. We've got other people that are very detail orientated. We've got people that are data orientated. That just expanded our skill set. And we found that the other thing that we were doing on the learning curve was that we ended up attending meetings for developers and developments that were happening in and around Shoreham, and that we started looking at planning proposals. And that we ended up trying to get an understanding of design guidance and principles for walking and cycling and how to improve things from that way, and just understanding what needs to be done. And that we realised if we wanted to improve things for walking and cycling in Shoreham, it's a bit late doing it after everything's been built. But if we can get in at the early stages and put in suggestions and put in objections to things that weren't right and etc., that was a much more useful thing. And then we obviously realised that we needed to understand the political landscape. And in Shoreham, we've got Ada and Worthing District Council, and we've got West Sussex County Council and how that works. And I note that we've obviously got Steyning Parish Council, and I think there's Bramber Parish Council as well. So the situation is a little bit more complicated where you guys are. But we realised that, okay, well, who are our councillors? We need to get to know them. This is Kevin Boreham, who's a district and a county councillor, who we very early on invited out for coffee and a meeting and said, look, what are your plans for walking and cycling? How can we help you achieve those? What can we do to help you and inform people about those? And we started to form relationships with councillors, and just a mutual one that was beneficial for both of us. And we started going to meetings on the Adrian Worthing Walking and Cycling Action Group and helping with various things there. And our opinions were suddenly being listened to as stakeholders and people that understand the area and understand how to get around by walking and cycling. And we got invited to county-wide workshops on this. And it was really interesting to hear council officers and councillors and people that were involved in this who don't live in the area but work on infrastructure in the area wanted to hear our opinions, which was great. So we got involved and helped form Adrian Worthing's local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which is a plan to actually get infrastructure, why we need it, where we need it, identifying primary and secondary routes and walking areas and walking zones within town. And we helped out with the consultation on that. This is a day where the public could turn up, and we were there all day with council officers and councillors and just answering questions for the public and helping them and showing them exactly where on the map things were. Something else that was really useful, obviously, decision makers and people that are in a position of influence, I suppose, whether that's with the police and police community officers or the police commissioners or councillors, just again forming relationships. And last summer we went round with various councillors to different locations in their parish and met and actually showed them specific problems and areas which we thought could be improved. And it's all very well writing an email and or a letter of complaint or whatever you want to do, but actually getting somebody there and explaining and showing them in person was really beneficial. So if anyone cycled along here on Shoreham Beach Green, they know how awful these little narrow barriers were to get through. And it still took 6 months, but the councillor thought that it could be an easy win and something that could easily be done. And we managed to get them changed to these barriers, which means that 2 people can get past. It means that people with buggies or in wheelchairs find it a lot easier to get through as well. So there's added benefits, or people with non-standard cycles. So this is a mother that was taking her 2 kids to school, who I spoke to and said, how did you find getting through the new barrier? And she just said it's made her life so much easier, so much better than having to hop up onto the curb, squeeze through a narrow gap and then hop down. So that was very useful. We also took a couple of councillors over to Brighton to have a look at the school streets over there, which was just a fantastic experience, seeing how good things can be. If you look at the school streets over here, look how much space is being used by people on foot, people that have walked, people with buggies. Now, normally they would all be crammed onto a small space on the pavement on either side of the road, and there'll be a massive bit of space here taken over by cars going past and transport. But kids had room to play and to run around. Parents could stand and talk. There was no fumes there. The air just tasted and smelt fantastic. It was brilliant to see. We spoke to headmaster there. We spoke to parents who were volunteers. We spoke to some kids as well and some residents, and everyone had a good word to say about it. It was fantastic. We also took some of the councillors out on bike rides on the pop-up lanes when they were there, to show them what it's like and the experience of actually being a cyclist and riding round there and riding through them and seeing how much safer the road felt with the lanes when they were there. And this is really important for them to see it with their own eyes, to experience it. So moving quickly on to the COVID and bike lanes. So we've been super busy since this happened. Obviously COVID struck and we weren't sure what was going to happen, but we just wanted to take as many opportunities to get cycling spoken about and in the news. And I'd seen somebody do a run on Strava, and they'd just very crudely written out NHS. And I thought, well, I'm sure I can do that on a bike through our town within an hour and staying within a 5-mile radius. So I think this was just at the beginning of April last year. And so we did this and we sent a press release off to the local paper, and it got picked up and it went all around the country: York, Yeovil, Bristol, all up and down. It even went to Germany, to Finland, to France. Spain didn't quite get it, and something got lost in translation there. And another headline there, it's a little bit embarrassing, but yeah, it got the message out there. It got Shoreham-by-Cycle's name out there as well and got seen. And then suddenly temporary bike lanes started popping up in Brighton. Brighton Unitary Authority, just Brighton Hove Council, and they're very progressive on cycling, which is fantastic. So we started to use those, and we'd go down there, we'd use them, we'd spread the word about them. I'd take some photos of people. And again, something else I want to point out here is that this is a person in normal clothing cycling with kids, a normal activity, taking them to school. And we're very much about showing that actually the benefits are for young and old and for just everyday people. So this is in Shoreham, and we wanted to show kids going to school and kids using it so that people see the benefit. It's not just for people in Lycra. That's not cyclists. As I said, we're not for cyclists, we're for cycling. So the West Sussex County Council showed, or told us, one of the councillors said that they wanted to see tangible evidence that the cycle lanes are being used and why they're being used and people were using them. We need to win over hearts and minds. So being a photographer, I just thought, well, what can I do to show that the lanes are being used and the benefits of them? And I thought, well, I'll just go down and I'll hang around on the Upper Shoreham Road, on the bike lanes, and I'll just stop people and just say, look, can I ask you what you think of the new bike lanes? And everyone using them loved them. They were either using them for the first time or riding down a road they wouldn't normally use, or changing over to a different form of transport. And I thought, this is great. So I ended up doing about 75 of these, and we've got somebody here who suffers from Parkinson, and just cycling is very important for him. We've got a pensioner who cycles every day, and she finds it easier and quicker than taking her cars. We've got someone that lives in Steyning and works in Brighton, and they started cycling into work again rather than driving. And this is the kind of evidence that we wanted to show the council and show people as well, and put out on our social media, and show people why the lanes are important to everyone. So as I said, we took about 75 different portraits of various different people of different ages, different abilities, etc. And we got those in the Herald as well. And we know that West Sussex officers were very pleased with the result and seeing these, and Adrian Worthing Council loved them as well. We also like getting information and facts and data out there, and I've seen some of the threads on the 20-mile-an-hour zone in the Steyning and Spotted and Upper Beeding groups, and I get really annoyed when people counter and they put facts and things that are wrong and opinions out there saying that the bike lanes are never used. I never see anyone using them. Well, there was an electronic counter that counted how many people were using them on a day and on a week, and you can see when the cycle lanes went in and how much they've improved and how much cycling has increased along there. So just getting the data out there, getting information out there and telling people so that they can see this. And actually people started quoting the numbers to other people and getting them out there and helping spread the message that actually the cycle lanes are used. You might not see people, it's like train tracks. They look empty 98% of the time, but they're very efficient at moving people. Whereas roads can be very inefficient at moving people and look busy all the time, but they're not actually moving people along there. And then we got a bit of a hammer blow. After 5 weeks of the lanes being up, the cabinet member decided that they needed to be removed, despite journeys increasing, despite schools and other community groups supporting them, despite air quality, council's own report saying that air quality improved because of them. So we were absolutely gutted about this. We knew that people were using the road and cycling more and feeling safer. So we just got a bit of press out there, and we applied pressure. We did a little video for the Department for Transport on the cycle lanes, which got some, within cycling community, got some national coverage and got Cycling UK interested and aware of the lanes. We got information out there that the cabinet member who decided to remove them after 5 weeks had never actually seen the lanes or visited them in person, which was just trying to get support and get people realizing that, hold on, this decision, although I wasn't for the lanes, the decision to remove them seemed like just a waste of money and a poor decision. We had regional news and press and TV coverage, and again, my colleague here not looking like a cyclist at all, just looking like a resident. And because of because of this and because of our relationships that we spent time cultivating with councillors, we could call on Kevin Boreham, who we met very early on in our history, and he managed to call in the decision on the bike lanes to the Scrutinies Committee, and 6-2 voted against the cabinet member to review his decision to remove the lanes, which unfortunately he still upheld and ignored that. However, I think because of the pressure that was put on, because of the publicity around it, West Sussex have agreed to, and their wording is, look at the possibility of investigating plans to install a permanent lane there. It's very woolly, but it's something that we're definitely going to be keeping up pressure, reminding West Sussex of their commitments to double the levels of walking and cycling, reminding them of the government commitments to increase cycling, and putting the pressure on them, working with them as well and helping them. We had stakeholder meetings with them about the consultation that's just come up and about the permanent lanes. We also want to show the public why the road is dangerous and why it needs cycle lanes. And crash map was mentioned earlier on, and this is the crash map, because people say, oh, I don't remember any accidents happening down that road. You might not remember them, but these are the actual facts and the stats and the actual data of them. Facts versus opinions, I will go with facts every day. And this is Operation Crackdown map of dangerous driving reported on Upper Shoreham Road. We looked at the data as well from that electronic data counter, and we realised that once the lanes had been removed, at around the same time, speeding incidents soared on Upper Shoreham Road. So we got that information out to the press, and we got that information out on the day that the consultation was launched for, or the pre-engagement consultation, they call it. There's a consultation happening in a month and a bit time. But we got that information out to remind people that actually the road needs to be improved, and that cycle lanes will have the benefit for pedestrians, for residents as well. I'm rattling through this because I'm very conscious of time, I'm sorry. But what we did is we're very keen not to focus on the 20% of people who will always cycle, whether they're lanes or not, or the 20% of people who will never cycle, but on the 60% in the middle who are very kind of would like to cycle if something was there, but they don't really care either way. We looked at all the objections to the pop-up lanes, and we thought, well, how can we counteract them? People didn't like the orange ones, but we wanted to show there are various different ways that you can have cycle lanes, and they can be very an improvement on the road. A lot of people objected to losing parking for cycle lanes, and we wanted to show them that this is in Hove, where you have parking and cycle lanes as well at the same time. They're not mutually, you can't have, it's not a question of having one or the other, you can have both. And the other thing that we did is we got different Google Street Views from around the country of good cycling infrastructure, and we superimposed them onto Upper Shoreham Road so that people can actually visualise and see what is possible, and that actually cycle lanes don't look too different to the road as it is, or actually they might improve the road. They might improve the road for walking and cycling and disability access. And then we're on to the survey and the mapping tool, which is something I wanted to bring up actually because it came up earlier. We've just had the first phase of 2 or 3 phase consultation, and there's a mapping tool. So West Sussex have access to this. And I know that we were talking about this earlier because this happened in Faversham for the 20-mile-an-hour zones. So West Sussex have this software already, or this consultation thing, and it was brilliant. You could drop a pin anywhere in Shoreham where you had either a cycling or walking related issue or opportunity, etc. And it was really interesting to see people where they had concerns, and a lot of it was speeding as well. I think it comes down to that there could be a lot of 20-mile-an-hour zones in Shoreham, but that was great. We got the message out there and showing people how to fill it in and helping them fill it in. And I think West Sussex said that they had over 800 responses in the first 2 weeks of a 3-week survey, which kind of takes us up to where we are. So we're thanking West Sussex. We're having a bit of a breather because we've just spent 3 weeks being really active on social media, getting the message out there. So what are the key messages that we've learned? Communication. Everything that we do is consistent. It's consistent that we never try and use the word cyclist. We always try and use the word cycling or people getting about by bike. Our images are always of ordinary people doing ordinary journeys. So we're not about cyclists, but we're about cycling. That comes there. So we want to move away from this us versus them. The majority of people that ride bikes also have cars, and we can't stand this conflict. It doesn't help anyone. We show people stats, data and facts, and we're trying to appeal to the 60% and what will benefit them. We're thinking about who our audience is and who the message is. We don't need to win over the people that we've already won over. We don't need to win over the people that we're never going to win over. It's the people in the middle that are the interesting ones that can really make a difference. So again, press releases, jumping on opportunities to make the most of things. I noticed last week there was a couple of press articles about a little boy who was almost hit by a car outside school, and people calling for school streets. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity to talk about, as I said, everything's involved. It's 20 mile an hour, it's encouraging walking and cycling, it's school streets, it's low traffic neighbourhoods. Everything can be linked in. And if we can get people on board, I know I had a quick chat with Dawn the other day. She's spoken to Nikki, who was involved in that in that article, and it was her son. We want to get people talking. If we can get people talking about which version of a cycle lane that they prefer, we'd much rather that than whether they're talking about whether they want a cycle lane or not. It's about getting the right information out there and helping people to see things and possibilities. We've learned that if you gather the information, you kind of become experts and you become knowledgeable. And what then happens is that the council and other organisations and people come to us for our advice and our expertise. And it's about meeting the right people, councillors, businesses, organisations, the police, seeing how we can help them and what we can do for them and they can get out of us and we can get out of them. Taking them out for a ride or a walk and showing them things in person. Meeting them at school gates and showing them how busy it can be outside a school, or how much traffic is there, or how much it speeds past. Forming these good and beneficial relationships. And then just very quickly, the future, what we want to work on is we're keeping a very close eye on future developments in Ada, which is New Monk's Farm, and then the Seafront Road on the A259, where they promised to build or leave space for cycling infrastructure. But we want to make sure that planning in West Sussex adhere to their commitments and to also government guidelines which are in place. And we want to work on things that improve and encourage more active travel and safer active travel, things like school streets, more bike parking in town to encourage people to come into town more, 20 mile an hour zones, low traffic neighbourhoods, etc. So I'm really sorry, I blasted through that at breakneck speed. I've seen that some questions have come up. So yeah, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand back, hopefully. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast. I did it as a practice run with a friend yesterday and it came out 22 minutes and that panicked me. So I've just blasted through it. But that's a brief history of us, what we've done and what's possible in a short period of time. We've only been going 3 years. So yeah, there you go.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. It's slightly, yeah, well, something awesome what you've managed to achieve. There's a lot for us to learn there. There was a quick question from someone that slid up the comments now. It's from yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to bother looking. School streets, are they kind of daily? Do you need a kind of temporary license to do those? What is the mechanism?
So Brighton and Hove are very different to West Sussex. As far as I know, in the whole of the county of West Sussex, there are no plans for any school streets, which is just absolutely appalling. We asked in a meeting with the Highways Department, what can we do to get school streets? We want school streets. There's 4 primary schools within Shoreham who would be ideal candidates for it. And unfortunately, I was given the answer, well, we need to work out what the problems are first, rather than try and find a solution and then find problems for them afterwards. Is it for cleaner air? Is it to increase safety? Is it to increase people walking and cycling to school? Is it to reduce the amount of cars? And we were shouting at the screen, it's for all of those. They wanted to then do a consultation, and it just feels to me, consultations are great. In Shoreham, I've worked out in 2 years, or over a 2-year period, we will have had 10 different consultations on walking and cycling. And I think consultation is just a great way of kicking things down the road and not doing it. We know why we want safer streets. We know why we need to encourage people to cycle and walk more. We know where we need to do it. The pressure is there. It's something that we want to focus on. I don't know the actual mechanism, but I'm sure that it'll take ages to do. But if it can be linked in, I like what you guys are doing for Greening Steyning is the 20 mile an hour is just opening the door, the first step on the rung to get to an improved town and safer streets for everyone. But in Brighton, I mean, it worked very well. It's been very encouraging, and they're actually making them more permanent. But my understanding of school streets, the easiest way of doing it is just to close the road for about 45 minutes at pick up and drop off either end of the day, just to allow people to walk there. And it pushes the parking out. So instead of having parking within a small area, because it's spread out, there's less people parking on junctions. You'd have to speak to a transport expert, but I just think they're brilliant. I've got 2 kids in school, and I just think it can improve things. I see people outside the school gates sat with their engines running on their phones, blocking the junctions, and then kids trying to squeeze between cars to get out to cross the road. I think school streets are great.
Adam, I don't know the legal either, but it's not the legals, it's the politics. If I mean, they are being put in all over the place, mostly in the more the city areas, lots in London. So it's not a legal problem. It's a political problem. If the desire is there to do it, then it can be done.
Yeah, political will is something that we're finding. I don't want to be too critical of West Sussex, but it's something that we find that Ada and Worthing have more political will to do active travel than West Sussex do, and it's trying to get people and trying to win people over. But I think if we can get the message out there on social media, put pictures out there, share experiences from other towns. The other thing that I wanted to say, actually, I forgot to say, was that what's great is that if you guys in Steyning manage to do, which I'm really hoping that you do, the 20 mile an hour zones, and we manage to get bike lanes in Shoreham, then what you'll find is that the residents of Shoreham and Steyning will go, well, hold on a minute, we'd like bike lanes. Oh, and we'd like 20 mile an hour zones. And it rubs off on the other towns, and it rubs off on there. And the more that you can do it, the more that it encourages it.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing. We're seeing that in Kent, with more and more people demanding. We've now got over 2,000 streets, 20 miles an hour. And this is simply because a few places have had it, and so everybody else wants it.
I'm very aware, sorry to interrupt, great discussion, brilliant talk, Adam, thank you so much. But we've been going for about nearly an hour and a half now. And are there any really urgent, maybe one quick question? Otherwise, I think we're going to have to tie things up.
If anyone does have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them. Just find us Shoreham-by-Cycle either on Twitter or Facebook or...
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Well, I'm going to say then, I think, Paul, you wanted to make an announcement before we finish up?
Yeah, just very briefly, behind me you see details of our next Green Drinks, which is going to be quite a big event called Countdown to 2030. We have our local MP, we have Isabella Tree from Manep Estate, and we've heard about this amazing campaign tonight. And this evening you'll hear about all the different campaigns covering energy, transport, lifestyle, recycling, biodiversity, repair cafes. So please come to it and tell everybody about it, because this is going to be the event where you really would learn about what we're doing here over the next 9 to 10 years.
Great, thank you, Paul. So it just remains to say a really big thank you to Adrian and Adam and Geoff. Great stuff this evening. Thank you so much, really informative. We've got some great ideas for campaigning as well. Thank you everyone for coming, and please we will be sending out an email actually afterwards with information if you would like to get involved, so how you can get involved with us. So thank you very much to everyone. Thanks to Alan for helping me chair, and goodbye.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.